she listens. She shows up by the spring where they had met and fell in love, which I think is just a really poignant, terrible detail. And she climbs up on his horse with him. They take off, and he takes her to this big, deep pool of water with this awful waterfall. And she's like, what are we doing? This isn't the way to town. And this is all, of course, true story by his report. So this is what he tells us happened. And he sort of says, you were really foolish to listen to me, like basically mocks her and pushes her down into the water, stands there, watches her drown. Again, really graphic, really horrible.
Welcome to Creepalachia. We have a live performance today. It'll be the first in studio history, and I'm so happy to be joined by Cassidy Dickens. We're going to talk murder and guitar, basically. Is that what we're thinking?
Pretty much, yeah. Yep, Appalachian murder ballads.
Awesome. Appalachian murder ballads, and I just noticed I'm going to have to turn my camera
off
center. All right, so where do we start? Give me a little background on you, Cassidy, and how you got into music.
Absolutely, yeah. So I grew up down here in Raleigh County. We were just talking before we started, but my family's originally from Clear Creek, and then I lived in Gent, in the Cool Ridge area for a while as a kid. And so growing up down here, I always talk about like my two grandmothers. I had one grandmother who played a lot of gospel music. Her name was Linda Dickens, and so she was a great singer and guitar player. And then my other grandma on my mom's side wasn't super musical, but she was a great storyteller, and just really into like passing on like folk stories and just, really into that sort of like colorful oral tradition that we love so much in Appalachia. So between the two of them, I found a love for music and a love for storytelling. And so then getting into songwriting and folk music was really natural. So did music. I think I started playing guitar when I was like 12 and pretty much started gigging immediately and have been doing it ever since.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you like perform in places and different
I do, yeah. So I've been doing this, like I said, since I was 12 for a long time. I grew up playing at a lot of like local wineries and restaurants and bars and things. And then I actually lived in Nashville. I just moved back to West Virginia last year, but I was in Nashville for 7 years doing the singer-songwriter thing and played at a lot of the bigger clubs down there on Broadway, that sort of thing.
How'd that go?
Oh, it was fun. It was great. I went down there mostly for like songwriting first. So to really like build my craft as a songwriter. And of course there's no better place than Nashville to learn how to do that. It was amazing. And then eventually kind of got to a place where I felt like I had met the people I needed to meet and done what I needed to do and was kind of homesick and circled back.
Yeah. Would you believe I'm going to Nashville the first time on Monday?
Oh my God. Are you really?
Yeah.
What are you
timing.
doing?
Well, I'm shooting a commercial for a client, not affiliated with this.
Okay.
But yeah, we're going to be down there filming for a couple days.
How fun.
Yeah.
I hope you love it. Let me know if you want to talk about travel tips when we're done.
Oh yeah, for sure. I need to know where to eat mainly, and then everything else will figure it out.
So much good food.
Yeah. So, all right. So give us a little backstory on murder ballads. Like, what are they for someone who has no clue?
Yeah, so I always say this is like kind of basic, but at their core, the simplest way to describe a murder ballad is just a song where somebody winds up dead. And it can be for a lot of different reasons. Usually it involves some kind of betrayal or a crime of passion. Most of the time, especially when you're talking about traditional older folk tunes, it is a woman who winds up dead. But yeah, that's kind of what they are at their basic core. And then if you start thinking about the lineage of murder ballads and how they got here, they actually stem back to British and Celtic ballad poetry. So originally, when we think about ballads now, we think about songs, but originally they would have been like really long kind of narrative poems that were designed to tell a story.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How did you start getting into some of that history?
Yeah, I mean, it was really organic, honestly. As a storyteller, as a musician, and especially, in West Virginia, like folk music is such a big part of our culture here that I was always just really kind of gravitated towards story songs. And I think about like early on, one of my favorite story songs was actually, it's a Garth Brooks song called Lonesome Dove. Do you happen to know it? It's like one of his deeper cuts.
I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. So it tells the story of, like, to make a long version short, it tells the story where there's this woman, she falls in love with a sheriff, and then they get married, and then the sheriff dies, and then like she raises her son, and he gets vengeance on his dad's killers. And it's a crazy, beautiful story. Yeah. And I fell in love with it when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I feel like it just like really ignited something for me where it was like, I love story songs, and then especially story songs that have like that little bit of a darker twist to them have always just really interested me. So I kind of have gone down the rabbit hole a little bit at a time over the years.
Heck yeah. So
Yeah.
I know you got 3 planned, but we may get into more as we go. So kind of let's lay the first one out. Which one do you want to start with?
Cool. Yeah. So I thought we would start with a song called Knoxville Girl. It's Knoxville, of course, relates to Tennessee, but it's actually one that has a really long lineage. So when we think about the fact that murder ballads come from these British and Celtic ballads, like many of these stories go back all the way to the 16th and 17th centuries. And this is one of those. It actually is about a murder that happened in 1683 in England. It was originally called Oxford Girl, or The Bloody Miller was like the original name of the poem. And it tells the story of a woman named Anne Nichols, who she got into this relationship. This is how so many of these songs start. But it's a young woman who gets into this relationship with this guy named Francis Cooper. He was a miller. And, they have this sort of secret love affair. And she finds out that she's pregnant. And so she tells him, they go to her family. And of course, this being the 1600s, this is a very big problem. And so her family, they're like, okay, well, you guys are getting married. Like, this is the only answer. But Francis at this point is really young. He hasn't had a chance to really sow his wild oats. He doesn't want to get married. And so he murders her brutally. He lures her out into the woods. He stabs her. It's a really brutal, awful murder. But the thing about this story that I always think is really crazy and unique is that he comes back to town and he's covered in blood. Doesn't even doesn't wash up, doesn't change his clothes. He just rolls back into town. And so everybody says, Francis, what happened? What's going on? He tries to play it off like he got a nosebleed. Which to me just sounds completely and utterly ridiculous. And of course, people see through it and then they end up realizing that Anne is missing. And of course, they figure it out. But yeah, the story was originally written as one of those narrative poems, actually with the intention of it being the way that they shared the news. You think about in the 1600s, we didn't have, social media, newsreel, whatever. Even newspapers were kind of very localized. And so it was a poem that was widely publicized, widely spread around to just kind of tell the story of what had happened to this poor girl.
Awesome. Well, I'm pumped to hear it. Take it away however you want to start.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So I'll say this is an example of one of those English songs that, was written over there so long ago and then it makes its way across the Atlantic Ocean. And so it maintains the integrity of the original story, but it puts a little bit of a different kind of Appalachian flavor on it.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Cool. All right. So here we go. This is Knoxville Girl. I met a little girl in Knoxville, a town we all know well. And every Sunday evening, out in her home I dwell. We went to take an evening walk about 8 miles from town. I picked a stick up off the ground and knocked that fair girl down. She fell down on her bended knees. For mercy she did cry. Oh, Willie dear, don't kill me here. I'm unprepared to die. She never spoke another word. I only beat her more, till the ground around me within her blood did flow. I took her by her golden curls. I drug her round and around, throwed her to the river that flows through Knoxville town. Go down, you Knoxville girl, with the dark and roving eyes. Go down, you Knoxville girl, you'll never be my bride. I started back to Knoxville, got there about midnight. My mother, she was worried and woke up in a fright, saying, dear son, what have you done to bloody your clothes so? I told my anxious mother I was bleeding out my nose. I called for me a candle to light myself to bed. Called for me a handkerchief to bind my aching head. Rode and tumbled the whole night through as trouble was for me. Like flames of hell around my bed, and in my eyes could see. They carried me down to Knoxville and put me in a cell. My friends all tried to get me out, but none could go my bail. I'm here to waste my life away down in this dirty old jail, because I murdered that Knoxville girl, the girl I loved so well.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow. You're so talented.
Thank you.
I was telling Cassidy before this, like, I have no clue what's about to happen. I think that I can make things sound good. And then she just starts playing, and I just get so excited because this is a really cool moment for the show. So thank you for doing this.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for doing all the work to have everything set up beautifully and make sure we sound good.
Yeah. It's going to be great. It's already great. But man, that's a brutal song.
Isn't it crazy? Yeah. And I mean, the original story is super brutal, but I think one thing, and one of the reasons why I picked that song that's super interesting, is that like so many of these songs, they have their origins in England and they make their way over here and they go through this like weird transition, just being passed on, going from English to Irish to Appalachian. So many of them do get like much more brutal in the retelling. And I don't know exactly why that is. I have a theory that maybe it's just because of like the harsh conditions over here and the fact that you're talking about stories that exist in like this rugged isolation. But yeah, they become a lot more like visceral and violent a lot of times in the Appalachian versions.
Is it to maybe make them more memorable or,
Yeah. I think, I think there definitely is an element of like memorability. And, I think part of it is that so many of these songs, like they start as like a news piece, right? Like the early versions are reporting. But as they kind of morph and carry on through the years, they almost become more like morality tales. So it's sort of a cautionary tale. And I think maybe that's part of it, is to make it more visceral and something that you hold on to more.
Yeah. So is this still a thing? I don't know. Like you don't really hear, I haven't really heard murder ballads, even with like Tyler Childers coming out and different things like that. I think would be really cool if they would write them.
It totally is still a thing, though. I actually, one that I'm going to play at the end is a newer one.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, they've changed. Like we don't tend to hear the quite so bloody graphic stuff anymore, just because I think that's probably not like mainstream radio friendly.
Sure.
But you definitely do hear. I always tell people, think about songs like "The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia" by Reba, or even like "Gunpowder and Lead" by Miranda Lambert. Earl Had to Die by the Dixie Chicks, or the Chicks now. Like they aren't necessarily murder ballads in that like folky, repetition refrain kind of way like that one is, but they absolutely still pull from that tradition. And one thing that I think is really cool, this is like a whole other tangent.
Sure, yeah.
But like in all these old songs, it's almost always that a young woman has been killed, presumably for getting mixed up with the wrong guy or something. And it's usually being told either by like an objective third-party narrator or by the killer himself. Like there's always somebody else narrating the story about this woman's death. And one thing that I think is cool is that as you sort of trace the way murder ballads have morphed over time, especially around like the 50s, 60s, 70s, you start to see this change where there are more songs written about either women doing the killings or women being like avenged in some way, or women telling the story. And it's this really cool moment where after hundreds and hundreds of years of this story being told, about violence towards women, it's like women artists get to kind of take the story back and put their own spin on it, which I think is really neat.
Yeah. I was gonna. So Earl had to die. That was one I was thinking. I was like, well, is it always men, murdering women, or do women get to, do some murdering too?
Yeah, that I don't condone anybody murdering anybody.
No murder people.
But it is like you look at these old timey songs, and like it's just one after another of like these poor young girls who fall in love and always end up getting murdered because they got pregnant. Like that's the classic story. Yeah. Yeah,
I remember when that video came out. It seems like I was in high school. I can't remember what year that was. Maybe it was a little bit after. I graduated in 2003, but I remember that video coming out and it being like, one, hilarious, but two, this is dark.
Groundbreaking. Yeah. It was quite, I don't remember how old I was. It was a kid, maybe, I don't know. Young enough that I was like really taken aback by it, but also like a little bit obsessed with it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that was a great first song.
Yeah.
What are we gonna pick up next?
Yeah, so I thought for the next one I would pick one that is a story that is like squarely Appalachian. Happened here, song was written here, everything about it is Appalachia. So this is a song called Omi Wise. And it tells the story of a murder that happened in the early 1800s in 1807 in Randolph County, North Carolina, not West Virginia. I live in Elkins now. So when I saw Randolph County, I was like, is this local? But it's not. It's North Carolina. But anyway, there was this woman named Omi Wise, and it's unfortunately a really similar story. So she was actually, sadly, she was orphaned as a kid, and she was indentured to this family, the Adams family. And they were kind to her. They raised her pretty much as a daughter, it seems like. But she did, work for them. She did chores on the farm, that sort of thing. And so one day when she was a young woman, kind of older teenager, she was out doing some chores. She was collecting spring water. And this man rides by on a horse, and he stops and says, "Hey, can I have a drink of water?" They get to talking. They really hit it off. He's like, "Oh, let me help you like carry these pitchers back up to the house." And, he gets to meet her family, and it just is this like very whirlwind kind of love affair. They fall in love at first sight, basically. And, she thinks like, this is it. Now, this man's name is John Lewis, and he is part of the Lewis family, who were like a pretty powerful, well-known family in the area at that time. And so word gets out that he's been seeing Naomi, who is this indentured servant, basically, for all intents and purposes. And his family says, absolutely not. We're not doing this. No. And actually, his dad's boss's daughter was about the right age to get married. Her name is Hattie. So they're like, we're not going to mess with this Naomi girl anymore. Instead, we want you to go marry Hattie. So John does the math and realizes that financially he's a lot better off if he marries Hattie. So he agrees. He says, yep, okay, sure, cool. That's what we're going to do. And he just stops going to see Naomi at all. He just like out of nowhere goes from 100 back down to 0. She has no idea what's happened. Hattie on the other side has no idea that he's been seeing Naomi. So it turns into this very like messy, slippery sort of love triangle situation pretty quickly. Which gets much worse when Naomi realizes that she's pregnant, as happens with so many of these songs. And so she goes and she tells him. And of course, he sort of panics and realizes that if anybody finds out about this, he's definitely not going to be allowed to marry Hattie. So he says, you know what, meet me in the middle of the night. We're going to go get married. And then nobody has to know what happened. We're just going to elope and it's going to be fine. So she listens. She shows up by the spring where they had met and fell in love, which I think is just a really poignant, terrible detail. She climbs up on his horse with him. They take off, and he takes her to this big, deep pool of water with this awful waterfall. And she's like, "What are we doing? This isn't the way to town." And this is all, of course, true story by his report. So this is what he tells us happened. And he sort of says, "You were really foolish to listen to me," like basically mocks her and pushes her down into the water, stands there, watches her drown. Again, really graphic, really horrible. And then, once he realizes she's dead, he rides away and just goes back to town like nothing happened. So the next day, of course, her family realizes that she's missing. Everybody goes out looking for her. They end up finding her body in the water. Everybody does the math pretty quickly, realizes probably this guy has something to do with it. So they jail him. But the crazy thing about this story is he actually escapes from jail, takes off, goes west, makes it to Indiana, starts a whole family out in Indiana, gets married, has a bunch of kids, has a whole life. And then years and years and years go by, and somebody finally finds him. So they get him, they drag him back to North Carolina to try him. But by this point, most people who were associated with this case have died. It's been years, and this is the 1800s, so we don't have, DNA evidence or anything like that. They are really heavily relying on that, personal account witness. And those people are just gone. So they aren't able to convict him. He gets off scot-free, goes and lives the rest of his life, whatever. But there is like a little bit of redemption that comes through with this one, in that he makes it to the end of his life. And in his old age, he is tormented by, it could be dementia, it could be a ghost, but he's tormented by, he tells his family, the image of a young woman. And then finally, in his last days, he confessed to having murdered Naomi, which of course everybody sort of knew, but he made it official. And they actually went on to name the body of water in North Carolina where she was murdered after her. I think it's called Naomi Falls, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Before you play this one, I'm going to move that mic down.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Just a little bit.
Is that in your way right there?
Nope, this will be perfect.
Stay. All right.
By the way, feel free to interrupt me if I get long-winded.
No,
stories.
be as long-winded as you want. Yeah, we got no time limit. This is awesome. So yeah, when you're ready, take it away.
Cool. All right, this is Omi Wise. Listen to my story, I'll tell you no lies. How John Lewis did murder poor little Omi Wise. He told her to meet him at Adams' spring. Said he'd bring her money and other fine things. So full like she met him at Adams' spring. But no money he brought her, nor other fine things. Go with me, little Omi, and away we will go. Off to get married so no one will know. She climbed up behind him and away they did go. But off to the river where deep waters flow. John Lewis, will you tell me you're mine? Will you be married or leave me behind? Little Omi, I'll tell you my mind. My mind is to drown you and leave you behind. Have mercy on my baby and spare me my life. I'll go home a beggar and never be your wife. He kissed her and hugged her and turned her around and pushed her in deep water to know that she would drown. He jumped on his pony and away he did ride, as the screams of little Omi went down the riverside. 'Twas one Thursday morning, the rain pouring down, when the people searched for Omi, but she could not be found. Two boys went a-fishing that fine summer day. They saw little Omi go floating away. They threw a net around her and drew her to the bank. Her clothes wet and muddy, they laid her on a plank. They sent for John Lewis to come to that place. They brought her out before him so he might see her face. He made no confession, they carried him to jail. No friends, no relations would go on his bail. Now listen to my story, I tell you no lies. John Lewis did murder Omi Wise.
Yeah. So cool.
It's another one. It's so sad. It's just so sad. But,
yeah. I mean, I hate to say so cool, but yeah. I mean,
it is
it's
cool.
Death, but it is cool.
The cool thing is, like, yes, it's horrible that this young woman lost her life, but it is cool that she's been able to be memorialized in this way. I mean, 100 and however many years later, we're telling her story. So there's something cool about that.
Yeah. I see it as a memorial too, for sure. So, and do you do a class on this? Tell me about.
Yeah, so I have a Murder Ballads workshop, and actually, if it's okay, I made a page where people who listen to your podcast can grab it for free if they want it.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you go to CassidyDickens.com/Creepalachia, I'll send you that link, but it's just CassidyDickens.com/Creepalachia. You guys can grab it and check out the whole thing. I go through 5 different songs and kind of tell the story in detail and get a little bit more nitty gritty into the history of how Murder Ballads came to be and all that good stuff.
That's so fun. And then this will be a good test of like, hey, it's actually beneficial to support the show. I'll be excited to see how many people visit, but that's cool. That's awesome. So how did you come up with this workshop? Yeah,
honestly, it was a little bit of a whim. I was playing, so do you know the song, Where Did You Sleep Last Night in the Pines?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was just out on my porch one day playing that song just for the fun of it. And it was like, I don't know, it was kind of a chilly winter day. And I was just like, this would be like really cool to know how this song came to be, and just kind of got to thinking. I was like, I don't know if anybody else would be interested in this, but I think it'd be fun. And Valentine's Day was coming up. So I was just like, let's do like a spooky Valentine's love gone wrong kind of thing. And that was the idea. And I just posted it on my social media and said, hey, would anybody be interested in this? And I got a lot of yeses, like an overwhelming number of yeses, which was really cool for me. I think, like, I don't know, those of us with niche interests tend to sometimes feel like we're like alone in a vacuum, liking our little weird thing.
That's how the show started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, people were really into it. And so we did the live version in February, and then now we've got the virtual version going.
I hate to put you on the spot. I love that song so much. I don't know if it's one of them that you picked, but can we do something on that one?
We probably can, if I can remember the chords. So we'll see. Let's see. How does it go?
I like to put people on the spot here because it creates, either really good or moments I have to edit out later. So
yeah. If you can give me 2 seconds to look up the chords, we can absolutely do it.
This is great.
Cool. Let me pull this out and make sure I'm singing the right notes here. But
yeah. And we can, so your third song, you'll need the capo. Do you want to do the third song first and then we can do that after? So you won't have to retune and go back, or do you don't have to tune anything?
No, I won't have to.
Okay, well, yeah, just carry on then.
I just got to make sure I'm starting in the right key so I don't sound crazy.
That's awesome. Yeah. So Nirvana did a cover of this song.
Yeah.
Nirvana Unplugged, and I never knew the song before I heard it there.
Well, that's actually, we talk about this in my workshop. It's one of the songs. I think it's the one we closed the workshop on. But yeah, so Kurt Cobain learned the Lead Belly version. And so that's the one he performed. But it's one of those songs that was just sort of like out in the ether of folk music world where nobody was really listening to it. And then, yeah, he kind of gave it new life with that MTV Unplugged special.
Lead Belly version. What do you mean? David Lead Belly, is that right? Or no, I can't remember. It's an artist, right?
Yeah, there's an artist. I think he just goes by Lead Belly.
Okay,
I'm not
maybe
sure
I'm
about.
wrong.
I could be wrong. Yeah. But it's a really old song. So Where Did You Sleep Last Night is one that I think it's kind of disputed where exactly it started. It actually was one that was sort of a merger of a couple of old ballads, and then Black families that came to Appalachia sort of brought their own like spiritual, soulful sort of approach to telling stories through songs. And like this was one that is traced back to Black families in, I think, Eastern Tennessee, or like the sort of mountain ridge line there.
Oh, cool.
They think that's where it originated, but they actually don't know who like wrote it. And there are dozens of versions of it.
They don't know who originally wrote the song.
They don't know who originally wrote the song. They don't know, like, it doesn't seem to be based on like one specific true story. It's sort of a conglomeration of different stories.
Mhm.
And like I said, there are a ton of different versions. And sometimes there's a train, sometimes there's not a train. Sometimes there are like references to coal barons or train tycoons. Sometimes there's none of that. Sometimes there's a dead man or a dead woman. Like the story changes pretty wildly. But the Leadbelly version is the one that I think has sort of become the standardized version, especially since the 90s, since Nirvana putting out their version. I think that's the one most people know.
Mm-hmm. There's something about a head was found in something.
Mhm.
A driver wheel. Is that
The
a car?
driver wheel. I think it's part of a train.
Okay,
I
gotcha.
could be wrong about that. I always assumed it was part of the train. And then some people think that the train is meant to be, a literal train, and that it has something to do with like maybe he was a migrant worker or something like that. Other people think the train is just totally a metaphor, and that it's, a metaphor for like carrying her lover away from her sort of thing. So it's one that's like really vague and hard to tell the story of, because the story is so kind of unknown.
Mhm.
But it has a lot of like cool little details that link together in a really interesting way.
How fun. So I go to the website, I click on Get the Workshop.
Yep.
and then
If
it
you click
takes
that, it'll take you to like, it looks like a checkout page, but it has a coupon code in there.
Heck
It should
yeah.
be free.
Okay, I'm going to definitely do this.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, if anybody has problems with it, email me. It's CassidyDickens@gmail.com and I'll help you, but it should work. I tested it before I left.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks functional. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Let's see about this song.
I would make it a duet, but it'd be terrible.
Yeah, I was like, you want to come over here and sing
Yeah,
harmonies?
so I'm just going to be like, I'm going to sit here and stare and then listen in the headphones.
All right, we can do it. It might be a little bit of a rough version, but we can do it.
Let's go.
All right. My girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? In the pines where the sun never shines. I shiver the whole night through. My girl, where will you go? I'm going where the cold wind blows. In the pines where the sun never shines. I'd shiver the whole night through. Her husband was a hard-working man, just about a mile from here. His head was found in a driving wheel, but his body was never found. My girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? In the pines where the sun never shines. I'd shiver the whole night through. My girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night?
Yeah. This is so fun.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. So when did you learn that song?
Oh, when did I learn that? It's one that it's one of those that I think I just always knew.
Just figured
as weird
out.
as that sounds. Yeah, I think I want to say maybe I heard Loretta Lynn sing it when I was a kid at some point. And maybe it was on like a cassette tape, or it's just one of those that was kind of always in my brain. And then I can remember being a younger teenager and I was getting ready for school. one morning, and they had, I think it was the anniversary of the MTV Unplugged special. And so they were playing it on like VH1. What was it called?
VH1? Oh,
yeah, is that what it was called?
Was that Unplugged was on MTV?
I think so, but they were like replaying, or maybe it was on MTV.
Now they did do replays on VH1.
Yeah, it was like an anniversary on one of those music things that I had playing as I was getting ready for school one morning. And yeah, I'll never forget. I was like standing there literally like curling my bangs in the mirror. And I heard him singing it and I was like, oh my God, that is hauntingly beautiful. And yeah, then just kind of got obsessed with them and their version of it.
So you're a Nirvana fan?
Yeah, I am. I'm a little like, he actually died the year I was born, so I came to it late, but
94?
Yep.
Wow.
But I do love them.
Yeah, I remember seeing when he died in a newspaper article in 94.
Yeah.
So so I was 9. Yeah, 9 years old. That's so cool. I mean, not cool. I need to figure out words. I mean, we're talking about murder, people.
Yeah, people are here
Murder's
for that.
not cool. Music is super cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember, I mean, I can see it right now, him playing on stage. That my brother was a huge Nirvana fan, and he'd listen to him and Smashing Pumpkins every morning when he was getting ready for school.
Yes.
It made me a fan. So that's awesome. All right. So, what age did you exactly pick up a guitar? You may have mentioned it. But.
Yeah, so I picked up a guitar fairly young. I think I was maybe it was my 8th birthday. My dad's parents gave me a guitar that had been kind of just passed down the family for my birthday. And I sort of messed around on it a little bit, but I think I was too young to really get into it. I would kind of play it like air quotes play it, but I didn't really learn it. And then over the years, like my papa taught me a chord and somebody else would teach me a chord, and I would start piecing things together. And then when I think I was 12, I think it was 6th grade, my school at the time had like an after school music program, and my band teacher, Bo McMillian, who's actually a musician around the area still, he had like an after school guitar class. And so I showed up with my little guitar. I was like, hey, teach me something. So he taught me my first 4 chords, like officially. It was just G, E minor, C, D. And I went home and played them around in a loop for hours and hours and hours. And then a couple days later, I wrote my first song, loosely speaking. I did write a song. It was not my best song, but I did write one. And came back and played it for my middle school band class. And after that, I just kept going. Yeah.
That's great. That was my next question. How many songs have you written?
Oh, God. Thousands, probably. Yeah, so many. So many.
I got to put you on the spot later after this 3rd song.
Oh, sure.
I just want to sit here and play for like hours, but I know that eventually you get tired.
Oh.
Your voice is like, come on. But, and on that too, how do you keep your voice in such good shape? Is there a way to do that? Or?
Yeah. So, especially like my first couple years in Nashville, I was playing a lot of like very noisy bar gigs. And I definitely did start noticing my voice getting worn out a little bit, which I didn't like. So, there are a lot of things you can do as far as vocal hygiene. Warming up is important. Drinking enough water is important. Kind of knowing your range and knowing your limits and honoring what your body will and won't do is important. For me, the hydration thing is a big one. I am a coffee junkie, and I will just drink coffee all day and forget that water exists.
Right.
So I have to make a point to drink enough water, and then you can do things like, steaming your vocals and like very specific singer niche things. But yeah, just learning like basic vocal hygiene is a good place to start.
Caffeinated coffee?
Yeah.
How much coffee do you drink? I have my number, and I think it's a lot.
I've dialed it back really good in the past like year. I used to wake up and drink a pot of coffee like in the first couple hours of the morning, and then I would take a break, and then about 3 o'clock I'd make another pot of coffee, and then it just kind of depended on how the day went. I would hack away at that second pot.
Yes.
Now it's more like 2-3 cups in the morning. And then maybe 1, like 3 or 4 if I start getting...
Yeah. That sounds like me. I usually drink it until I get a massive headache. And then I'm like, yeah, I probably should stop. Yeah,
this is like, it was terrible. But I went on a girls' trip with a bunch of other women about my age to Yosemite National Park. And we stayed out in this cabin that was like way out in the park. We woke up the next morning and everybody realized that the girl who was supposed to have brought the coffee forgot it. And everybody else was like, oh, no big deal. Whatever. It's fine. almost ruined my entire day. Like I was so irritated about the lack of caffeine, and we were going this like 8-mile hike, and I was like, how am I supposed to do this? But then I don't know, I sort of had a like come to Jesus moment later in that week. It was like I should not have been that thrown off my game by the lack of a pot of coffee.
Sure, yeah, no.
I got it back together.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are you an energy drink fan?
No, I'm not. I'm not an energy drink girl.
Well, there's this drink called Alani Nu Cherry Slush, and it's the greatest thing on the planet. But I'd always got to shout its praises. But I mean, it's probably not the most healthy. It's like 200 milligrams of caffeine a shot, and I'm like, I'll drink 3.
Oh God,
you know, it just tastes so good.
Oh man, no, I'm pretty strictly coffee and tea, so I like to think it's like a lesser evil. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's what I tell myself.
I mean, that's true. Coffee's about 80 milligrams a cup, but you know, I got to calm down on the caffeine. I swear. All right, so we got another song lined up.
Yeah.
Lay this one out.
Yeah, so this one is, so I always say at the beginning of my workshop, I always say, you know, we're going to talk about the true-ish, and not so true stories behind murder ballads. Some of them are like directly linked to a historical event. Some of them like, you know, where did you sleep last night? We have no idea where they came from. And then some are kind of in the middle. So this is an example of both a newer song. You asked if people are still writing these, and one that is a true-ish story. So this is actually, do you know Charles Wesley Godwin?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love him. I'm very, very into
West
his
Virginian.
music. Oh yeah. I saw him in Morgantown, I guess it would have been last year maybe. And he played this song that I had never heard of his. It's kind of a deeper cut, but he told the story about it. So I guess he was traveling. I think he said he was on tour in like 2005, going through Pennsylvania in Potter Township. And he was really struck by these cranes. They had these big old cranes doing this big construction project. And so he sort of made note of it. And then later on, he found out that the cranes were there because there was some kind of big like shell project being built. And in the middle of this big construction project, they had unearthed a body. And so, you know, everybody sort of panicked and they thought they were going to link it to a cold case in the area. So they send the body off to be examined, and the coroner comes back and says, guys, this body is like really old. And they don't really know anything else about it. It went through I think a few different like rounds of kind of trying to figure out like historically where this body may have come from. But Charles Wesley Godwin wrote this song based on his experience with the story, which was basically what I just said. Not so much on the like hard facts of where this body actually came from. So it's a fictional story based on the real life finding of a body in this construction site, if that makes sense.
How fun.
Yeah. It's
so
really
it can't be used
song.
In court as evidence.
Yeah, no, it's,
Got it.
I think everybody in this story is completely made up, but I thought it was a really cool, just a really cool way to take like a blip of inspiration and turn it into something bigger. And it absolutely does build on that sort of like murder ballad tradition. It's a really cool song. So if you like it, be sure to check out his version because it's beautiful, of course.
Great choice. Take it away.
Claire was the mayor's daughter. Knees went weak when I saw her. We tussled for a summer when I walked in on her and Clyde. And so she'd often wander with every boy in Potter. Many suitors died with honor in the war between the states. And Clyde was a cavalryman. When he got home, to him she ran, but he had eyes for western lands and left her behind. So Claire settled down, her husband moved her out of town. They tried to lay her past to rest, hung up those evening gowns. Now Jeremiah was a logger. We all knew he was off his rocker. Thought Claire to be his lover. Much to her surprise, her children loved their mother. Towards their father she grew fonder. Her hair just turned blonder. Beauty stood the test of time. Then word got around that Clyde was back in town. By way of manifest destiny, he gained himself renown in the year 75, 10 years after Lincoln died. Claire kissed the kids goodnight, snuck off to meet her old friend Clyde. Now Jeremiah saw his chance, his own twisted, sick romance. Denying his advances, Claire was never seen alive. He hung for what he'd done. We caught him, buddy, with his gun. He never told us where she lay, but I know that Claire would run. We never found that girl from Potter, who'd so often wander, till more than a century later, a builder found her in the ground beneath the cranes of Potter. Where Jeremiah shot her, there lies the mayor's daughter, 2 feet down beneath the cranes of Potter. Hair no longer blonder beneath the cranes of Potter, in her finest evening gown.
Wow.
Isn't that gorgeous? I love that song.
That is so, he wrote that?
He wrote that, yep. The first time I heard it was he was playing it live in Morgantown, and it just, knocked the breath right out of me. It was stunning.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. All right. So I want to talk about songwriting.
Sure.
So first, I'm going to ask for 2 more favors. I want to know the favorite song you ever wrote.
Oh, gosh.
And the process behind that first.
Okay. Actually, this is an easy one. I've got a lot of songs that I'm proud of, but definitely my favorite one. And actually, this is actually a funny coincidence, but it's a song called Clear Creek that I wrote about the town where my family's from, here in Raleigh County, West Virginia. So the process for it, well, I should say it's a song about my grandmother's life story. And so several years ago, she was visiting my family. My parents were living in Florida at the time, and she was visiting, and she fell and broke her hip, and she ended up having to stay in Florida for a really long time to recover from that. And weird turn of events, I also was involved in a car accident and also got stuck in Florida recovering at my parents' house at the exact same time. So I ended up with several weeks with lots of time on my hands and my grandma right there. So she and I did a lot of talking in those few weeks. And I just got to ask her, like, she was the one who was a really great storyteller. So I was like, hey, tell me some stories. Like, tell me some stuff about your life. Tell me about the highs and the lows, and, tell me everything. And she had always been pretty open about telling personal stories, but it was the first time that she really, I feel like, let herself like really open up. I was an adult by that point, and she was into her 70s. And so was just really honest in a way with me that I think she hadn't been when I was a kid. And, talking about some wonderful things that had happened and some really hard things that had happened and how it had all impacted her. And it was one of those conversations where, like, those rare moments where you recognize as you're having it how special it is.
Mm-hmm.
So much of life, I think we realized later how cool something was or how lucky we were. But it was one of those, like, even as she was saying it, I was like, I'm never going to forget this. And so after we had that conversation, I knew I wanted to turn it into a song, but it was so much, and it was so rich. And I wanted to be careful to do it in a way that was like really honoring everything about her and about the community, but also not just like sugarcoating some of the hard stuff. And it took me a long time to find my way through it. Sometimes with songwriting, you sit down and I have songs that I wake up and they're in my head and they're done in 30 minutes. But this wasn't one of those. This was one that it was a tangled mess for a couple years. And I went back and rewrote it and couldn't get it right. And then a couple years down the road, she ended up really sick. She was in the hospital in Charleston, South Carolina. I was living in Nashville by then. And so, got the call that you never want to get, that her health had taken a turn. And they were like, if you want to say your goodbyes, now's the time, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I got on a plane the next morning, flew down to Charleston, South Carolina with all my cousins. It was actually really incredibly lucky. It was right in the middle of COVID. And we just got insanely lucky. Her nurses let literally our entire family in, of like 10 of us, and just like camped out on our hotel room floor for like 2 weeks. But I, on the plane, kind of realized like, this is my one chance. If I'm ever going to show her this song, like it's got to be now. So I finished the song on the plane, got there and played it for my sister and some of my cousins. And they were all like, loved it. You have to play it for her. And so it was actually like one of the last moments I had with my grandmother was getting to play her this song. And it was just, seeing the smile on her face. Like she was one of the biggest supporters of my music. She was just an incredible person and one of those people that like really makes you feel like you can do absolutely anything. And was a big part of the reason why I had the courage to become a musician in the first place. 'Cause it's not an easy road. And so anyway, that's my favorite one because it's about her and it's special, but it's cool because I released it a few years ago after she passed, and I really just kind of thought it was going to be like for me and my family, but I put it out, and it was actually one that I've gotten a huge amount of people reaching out and saying like, oh my God, this reminds me of my grandmother. This reminds me of my small town. It's had a much bigger ripple effect than I expected it to. And so, it's my favorite for a few reasons.
That's awesome. I relate to that so much because my daughter, for instance, first off, creatives, like, I'm in the video world, you're in the music world, but at the same time, we're sensitive balls of emotion. And you saying that made me think like every time I look at my daughter, we'll be, watching a movie or playing some kind of sport or whatever. And I'm just like, man, can this just stop? Can I stay here for about 3 years before we move to the next second? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's, I kind of, I felt that when you were talking about that. I know what that's like.
It is like, it's on one hand, being a little extra sensitive can be a little hard sometimes, but then in those moments, I think it is special to have those moments where you feel like time just slows down a teensy bit and you get to like savor things a little bit more.
Yeah. Have some perspective. But sometimes it would be nice to be like, I don't give a crap about nothing,
An extra layer of skin would be useful sometimes. Yeah.
It really would, especially when you get a critic that's like, hey, like I was saying on a show before this, I'll hear 100 amazing things and then one kind of not good thing, and then it just destroys my whole day. You know what I mean? Are you like that too?
Oh my God, yes. But I always tell this story. Sometimes I'll teach things for younger artists, especially, and I always make sure to tell this story anytime I'm working, especially with younger creatives. When I put out my first album, I do this thing with my voice. It's called a register shift, where you kind of have this like yodely kind of break thing. A lot of people like it. Not everybody does, but it's just something that I've always done. It just is naturally in there. And I think it's a big part of like the Appalachian way of singing. But when I put out my first record, I submitted it. There's a process you can go through to get reviews from people in the industry, whatever. So I submitted it, and literally back to back, the first one I opened up, and now mind you, I think I was 20, maybe. I was really young and very tender, very like, kind of precious baby artist stage. And the first thing I opened up was, stop trying to yodel. You're not the Cranberries. It sounds terrible. And I was like, oh my God, like suddenly became really self-conscious about this thing that like other people had always said they thought was cool. And now there's this one person on the internet being mean.
Screw that person.
But then literally the next one I opened. So like I was like sad about it, whatever. And then I came back to them later and was like, oh, okay, deep breath. I hope they're not all mean. And literally the next one I opened was, oh my God, I love the register shift you do with your voice. That's so cool. And I was just like, okay, like, it's something, some things are for people and some things they aren't. And you just got to roll with it.
The whole art in general is subjective. First off, okay, some things there's, everyone could agree like that's kind of trash, but even still, it may be beautiful to a certain portion of people. So that's the critics are, there's a way, I know there's a certain way that we've always done certain things and this and that, but I, for one, say, what fun is it just to conform and try to make something that you want to sell rather than make something you want to write?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's something that, it's funny you say that, because that's actually, I'm working on a new record right now, and the sort of like loose concept behind it is this path of like finding my way back to that as a songwriter. You asked about Nashville earlier, and Nashville was great, but there was a lot of like kind of, these are the rules, this is the path, this is what the industry wants, sort of like training my brain to think in that way. And it's been really freeing to kind of step out of that and be back in West Virginia. The music scene here is amazing, and people here have a much deeper connection to like folk themes and poetry and just things that are a little bit different, not quite mainstream country. And so it's been a really like liberating experience to be back around people who think that way, as opposed to thinking like based on what the machine wants,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think now, especially with the internet, you can find people like that who have been creating in a certain way that was never put on, CMT or MTV or any of the TVs. And it has this grainy culture, historical vibe. I don't know. It's just when you hear something unique, you can just appreciate it more.
It's honest. Yeah. I think that's what it is for me, is like, certainly not to like throw shade at anybody in Nashville. I think there are, so many incredible writers there, but everything that comes through, at least like mainstream country world, is like so polished, right? It's got to be polished. It's got to be relatable to a wide audience. And so that you have to like take some of the like gritty truth out of it for it to be that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think what I've really experienced from the music scene in West Virginia is that like raw, just honesty that people have the ability to tap into, which is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And and it can go beyond the verse, chorus, bridge.
Yeah.
Chorus out.
Yeah.
You can, just tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love specifically about Murder Ballads too, is the story it tells. And I feel like I'm curious what your like top 3 inspirations are in the music world. Like if you had to pick a few, who would you say speaks to you the most?
Yeah, that's tough.
Not sliding any others, but it's like, like I was listening to Tyler Childers, I've mentioned yesterday, and I was just thinking like, this dude is so good.
Mm.
When you just listen to the words, and like I'm kind of tearing up right now, just when you listen to the words, and being from West Virginia and Appalachia, I think everyone here really feels it when they listen, and you hear the soul in his voice, and all this stuff just comes together to make this thing.
Yeah.
That's mine, but I'm not, I was in a heavy metal band for like 3 years.
You get it though. I mean, I think that's exactly the right response. I think songwriting wise, there's one person who's like at the top of the list. Her name's Lori McKenna. She's a really well-known songwriter, especially in the country world, although I think she's written in a couple other genres too. She's most well-known for actually writing a handful of songs for Tim McGraw and Faith Hill.
Nice.
But she has a lot of her own. She has her own independent albums. And I love the songs that she's written for Tim McGraw and Faith Hill. They're great. She did like Humble and Kind is probably the one that everybody knows. She did Stealing Kisses for Faith Hill, but her stuff that's just like her independent albums, it's just this like incredibly raw, honest, like we were just talking about, like slice of life kind of stuff. And she grew up in the South in the Bible Belt, or maybe it wasn't, maybe she grew up in the Northeast, but she grew up in maybe Rust Belt, I don't remember, but somewhere that has that sort of like small town kind of vibe. And she writes a lot about like, just the normal, like your brother going off to work in the factory, or like your high school best friend marrying her high school sweetheart and then that didn't work out, and like how sad that is, just like the stuff that we all know and understand. But she does it in a way that really honors like the beauty of it versus making it seem like, a trope.
Sure.
So yeah, she's one of my big songwriting influences. Probably I would say, just as far as like inspiration and people that I think are really cool, Hazel Dickens.
Mm-hmm.
She's, West Virginia. I think she was from like Mercer County, I think is where she was from. She's a distant cousin, so I know she was from down here somewhere. I never met her or anything like that, but I just remember hearing her name as a
y'all
kid,
got the same
and like
genetics.
loosely. I don't want to make it sound like something it's not, but like right. I knew we had the same last name, and I knew she was from the area. And as a kid who wanted to do music, it was cool, right?
Yeah.
And she was a big like bluegrass pioneer. I think she was one of the, if not the first, one of the first like big female bluegrass singers. And she writes a lot. She has a song called like Black Lung. She's got West Virginia, My Home. She writes a lot about this area and some of the issues and the stories that we see down here. And same thing, she does it in a way that's like very honest to the experience of someone who's been through that stuff versus like, looking at it from a high level far away.
Yeah.
And then if I had to pick a third one, I mean, I could like Stevie Nicks, Jewel. There are so many. But as far as like people, like
Jewel's so good.
I love Jewel, and she was one of the ones early on. She and Alanis Morissette. Like I always felt like I didn't have like a normal voice, right? Like I was like, where are people that have other like kind of weird voices like mine? and I found them in the 90s and really gravitated to them.
Yeah.
But I love, like, to go back to Charles Wesley Godwin. He's actually been a big inspiration to me in recent years, just seeing somebody, based in Morgantown and such a brilliant writer, and being able to do what he's done with his career has been just really, really inspiring to me as an independent artist.
He's been really a good spokesperson for West Virginians.
He's incredible.
Too.
Yeah. I have so much respect for him.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. All right, can we play the grandma song?
Yeah.
What's
Clear
it called?
Creek. It's called Clear Creek.
Clear Creek. Well,
yeah, my
I'm
pleasure.
Excited.
This one is not a murder ballad at all. But it is, like I said, it's her life story. And I always say, like, I can't tell my grandma's story without also telling the story of the town of Clear Creek, which, like so many little towns in Appalachia, it's got its problems, right? Like it's got some of the same issues we see all around Appalachia. And I talk about that a little bit in the song, but it also just has some of the most incredible, amazing human beings. And so that was the energy that I tried to capture in this, is that sort of push and pull between just like the incredible amount of love and warmth and welcoming that you feel when you go there, underscored by some of these like harder topics,
Awesome. I'm going to crack open this liquid death. I don't want to cut you off. All right, I'll go ahead and do that.
No, you're good.
All right.
So this is called Clear Creek. I remember like I was there last week, wandering down a holler in Little Clear Creek, back when time was slow and the water was clean, and I'd have called you crazy if you said I'd leave. I remember mommy in her red lipstick, somehow looking pretty, chasing us 5 kids, and daddy in his cold truck rolling in. We didn't have much, but we had all you need in Little Clear Creek. I remember old men talking war and boys getting caught up with girls next door, walking 3 miles to the grocery store to hitch a ride home in someone's Ford. And I remember going to the old high school, smoking cigarettes cause you had to look cool, living like anybody had a clue what was going on in the world outside those trees of Little Clear Creek. Well, soon we learned the world didn't give a damn, head off to the mines or Vietnam. And Mama tried to warn me to leave that place, but I fell in love, so I just stayed. And I remember saving every dime we got to build a little home up log by log, and just how good it felt in his big arms, raising 2 kids in a little backyard. And I remember when your mom and daddy met, they came by the house looking scared to death. Well, they got married, and you know what's next? They moved up north to grow your family away from Clear Creek. Now the mountain's been stripped and blown to dust, and most of our friends have blackened lungs. And all the young folks are on pills these days, with bills they can't pay and kids they can't raise. And every old storefront's boarded shut, the high school closed and the holler floods. That home we built still got burned down. I'm really not sure what's left there now, but I'll remember life how it was for me, learning and loving in Little Clear Creek, back when time was slow and the water was clean. Lord, how I miss what used to be. Looking back now at all that's changed, I wouldn't undo one single thing, 'cause all that I lost meant something gained. So I thank God for all He gave to me. Yeah, I thank God for friends and family, and for Little Clear Creek.
Cassidy. That is so good.
Thank you. Thank you.
My goodness. So that took you 3 years, you said?
Pretty much. On and off. Yeah.
Well, it paid off.
Thank you. Yeah. That was a tough one, but it's one that will always hold a special place. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's how can you have a more favorite song than that one?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's so good. All right. Well, I think I've put you under enough pressure. I mean, I don't think you you didn't miss a chord. You didn't miss a note.
I hope not. We'll see when we listen back.
Your voice didn't crack. I'm going to try to, do good on the mixing, but I don't think I have to do much.
Thank you. Yeah.
So yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming in. So people will know, we mentioned go to CassidyDickens.com/Creepalachia for free admission to a 5-song workshop.
Yep, 5 songs.
Yep.
And with that, you get audio recordings of all the songs. So if you want to listen back and learn them, you'll get a little private snippet of me singing all the songs to you.
Oh, nice. Where do you record at?
Well, those I actually just recorded in my home studio. I'm working with a really great producer right now in Shinston on my next record, but these are just a home studio thing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Shinston. Is it Greenbrier County?
No, it's up kind of close to Clarksburg.
Why don't I know this? But all right. So yeah, where can they find you on? You're on Facebook.
I'm
you're
everywhere.
On TikTok.
Yeah.
You're on all the things.
Over the place. Easiest, like the hub, is just my website, CassidyDickens.com. I hang out mostly on Instagram. If you're over there, I'm at Cassidy Dickens. Facebook, I think Facebook and TikTok are both Cassidy Dickens Music. But yeah, just if you type in Cassidy Dickens anywhere and you see a blonde woman with a guitar, it's me.
Apple Music,
Spotify, Amazon, anywhere you would think you can find music, I'm out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure.
Yeah, we've got to do this again. Everyone else out there, please like this video, subscribe to Creepalachia, follow us on Facebook. We're on TikTok, all those good things. And if you're listening to the audio only version, be sure to leave a review on Apple or Spotify. That will help the show get found. And I guess I don't think we have anything else to say, Cassidy. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Be sure to check Cassidy out. And always remember, long live Appalachia.